right, we're all here. We're assembled. Nick, where are you at?
I'm in South Brooklyn, yeah.
Okay, you're in Brooklyn. Okay, cool.
Uh-huh.
I've been telling people lately. The other day, I heard a podcast that came up about the Harlem Renaissance, and I've thought for a while that Brooklyn's kind of in that Renaissance era, so to speak. There's so many musicians. There's so much going on. It just seems like there's this level of artistic and cultural and sports revitalization that's going on there.
I mean, I can't really speak to a whole lot other than the musical thing, but the music in Brooklyn is incredible. Basically, any neighborhood that you're in, you're a 5 minute walk from world class, music any night of the week.
Yeah.
So, this is one of the few places that I think that that's true. I'm sure there's stuff going on in other fields, but I can't really speak to that.
So, as we established, whether this will be before we got on or as we're on, Nick has been, I just discovered on one of my favorite albums of all time by the great Matt Villinger called All Night. Kyle, we interviewed back in 2018. Big fan of your work. I've had on the show. So, we're getting into a new project with Triple Blind called Cold Walks. So, thank you for taking a minute out, gentlemen. I appreciate it.
Thanks for
Oh,
having us.
So let's begin our journey with this. Right now, as we look at the calendar, March is on there, and 6 years ago, this pandemic totally changed everything, especially for musicians. How did you get through that era, and how has it influenced either the formation of this band or the way that you operated as a musician?
I think the pandemic is partly responsible for us ever putting anything out ever because we were kind of, I think, speaking for all of us, going a little crazy trying to figure out how to feel creative in that time. And the four of us that are on this record now, well, me, Kyle, and Peter, the drummer. So we kind of just started like file sharing and working on music, and then that involved like other guests. Kyle and us all have like, a lot of friends. The music world is small, and so we just started like collaborating, and that record is actually what Kyle submitted to get this Chamber Music of America grant that we ended up being able to make the current record with. So for us, it's kind of responsible for us like actually starting to have output as this group of people.
Yeah, we'd all been friends for a long time, and we'd talked somewhat idly about starting a group because we all loved each other's playing, especially the trio of me, Peter, and Nick. We hung out a lot. We played a bunch on other people's gigs and played sessions with each other, but we hadn't really actually spurred something. But then when the lockdown period of the pandemic happened in New York, I mean, it was pretty harrowing here. People were not going outside, but we were doing a lot of we talk on the phone pretty frequently, like, we should do something. We should, and so we actually just, started we started with MIDI skeletons and made a record, building it out from there.
Well, and we've entered a different chamber right now of living in this country that probably is as equally as daunting as that time. And it's just this era of immigration and war and all of these things that are happening. And the reason why I bring that up to the forefront is that I believe that artists during times of tumult in this country have always operated as kind of conduits to escape and to get into the arts and to feel connected and good about being alive in this country. And I think that musicians have that conch in their hands right now, and they're helping us get there. Is that in your mind as you deliver music, whether recorded or live, something you think about in this modern era?
Kyle.
Yeah, when let's say when the latest, sort of round of political madness has been going on in this country, for lack of a more succinct way to say it, or maybe that is the succinct way
It
to say it.
is.
Yeah. I'm kind of, it made me glad I'm a musician. You know, One, for practical reasons, because there was so much upheaval, and I feel really bad for. I have a lot of friends that were either working in like healthcare or government that got their jobs slashed, and we're scrambling for work, and that musicians are sort of outside that, but also just to feel good about what I put my time and effort into. I had this conversation with a lot of musicians. They feel the same way. It's just, you feel as a musician sometimes a little bit outside of society, and that can be a good thing and a bad thing. But particularly during this time, it feels like it feels kind of hard to put your head to something, decent in this world. And I think that being able to put your mind toward music and be able to participate in something that's bigger than you, being able to, play shows and hopefully bring joy to people in the audience it's a powerful thing to be able to do. So for practical and sort of more metaphysical reasons, I think it's been good.
Very well said.
Yeah, I think that it's funny that like the practical does work out. There's a lot of people in sectors of like where they work where it's just like thought they had complete job security, and it's like you don't really know.
And probably should have, should have.
For
Uh-huh.
sure.
Yeah.
For sure, but it's just like I've always like been grateful to have figured out what I love to do at a young age, and luckily it's like continuing to work out. But yeah, I feel like the space of live music, I think that'll I think that's just such an important space, not to like overgrandize it or anything, but like it's just it's always there for us as like societies and like as communities. You can just go and just feel some sense of normalcy, and that stuff happens, you know, like the band went down with the Titanic playing. It's sometimes, yeah, we're
I'm
doing
hoping
that
that
right
that's
now.
hoping that's not the situation we're in, but
You
yeah.
like that?
And well, everything can be so atomized these days and fractured with the way that people, communicate with each other, and everything is moved online to some extent. And especially with the advent of AI, it feels really good to like, engage in something that not only is there a community of musicians that we can, be a part of, but there's also, when you play that live show, you're communing with people in a space, and it feels important.
And that AI thing is a whole other Arthur C. Clarke
Okay.
spaceship. I mean, that's like aside from all of the things that are happening right now. But the thing that was interesting during the time, I ramped up my interviews so much during that time of COVID, and I felt like jazz musicians of all the artists in the world were the epitome, the metaphor of what we were living through. You all are always thrown onto stage into the unknown, and you have to create something that's going to happen once. And you're already getting into an idiom where there's not a lot of money. You're getting into it because of the love of this and the community and all of that. So it feels like, when like Nick, you were talking about that level of adaptability and dealing with all of those things. That's what you guys have dealt with all the time. That's your reality.
I mean, yeah, maybe in a little bit less dramatic.
Well, yeah, I'm not trying to be as dramatic, but I'm just saying that there's a lot of musicians that get up that have everything pretty much figured out, and they're trying to play it in the way that they know it in the studio. But you
Yeah.
guys get up there and you do it in a way that no one's ever going to hear again, and there's nothing about it that's tricky or that's unknown about that. That's your reality. And when we were living through COVID, we were all thrown into the unknown. Every part of our reality was totally thrown like a snow globe, and it's kind of that mimicking of art and reality there.
I think that also jazz music, this is a little bit of a pivot, but I also think that we were perhaps more driven to have to do something during the pandemic just because the aspect that you're talking about, like the interactive aspect of the music, which is essential to it, was kind of we couldn't get it.
Yeah,
You can't get that playing by yourself, which we were in that position for a while, and so there was kind of a need to make something during that period. So I'm not sure if it was necessarily that we had that it was an asset of ours that we were able to deal with it, or if it was just a particular need in the
sure.
sense of, yeah. So it might have been a little bit of both.
I think the skill that helped me out the most that I gained from my musical life and career was that you spend so much time actually doing nothing on things like tour or on like wedding gigs when you're sitting in a back room with for a couple hours between sound check and when you have to play, like this ability to kill time, that and feel good about it, you know, and also just have something to work on, have music to work on. Like I became a night owl through the
Oh, me
pandemic.
too.
I would start my day at like 5 p.m. and go to like 3 or 4, you know. But that whole time was just like I have a studio set up here, it's just tinkering, you know. I was able to like not go crazy because I knew how to just like
Yeah.
not waste time, but really just like how to like enjoy how do I get this same sound off this record out of my synthesizer and hang out with that for a long time, you know? I think that really helped
I
more
remember
than
doing
anything.
things that like I would never do normally. I would like sit down with a Wayne Shorter record and just comp on the piano. Just like, okay, I'm
Great.
just gonna comp through every tune on Night Dreamer right now.
That's awesome.
You know?
Yeah, yeah. So Cold Walk is the album. So, and you described kind of how you came together and it was kind of an outgrowth of the COVID time period. What are you hoping the listener gets from this project?
I personally I think our main goal was just to make something that's interesting to listen to. You know, I wanted we all spent a lot of time sending records back and forth, you know, and we all kind of like landed on this place where we really are drawn collectively to records that you can like really gain a sense of the space that the musicians are playing in, you know? So like, and I don't, for me, I feel like that's just like a really, it's one of those intangibles in art that I feel like is actually important and like you can feel like okay, I can hear that these people are all in the same room. I'm not like dogmatic about that. It's just something that we all were like drawn to.
It
So like
particularly resonates with us, yeah, for sure.
yeah, so like the process of like actually going into the studio and making the music, like capturing that like these are four people hanging out in what this room sounds like. I think that was kind of like the main impetus, you know. And that's not I'm this is coming off of making a record that was completely file sharing. So we're not like
Yeah, it
we're
was
not
the complete opposite. We were trying to, we did everything completely remotely, and then we wanted to all be in the same room with no, and the engineer beforehand was like, "Are you guys sure you want to do this?" Because it was recorded in Dreamland, which is a former church. So it's a very resonant, beautiful, big, open space.
Yeah.
which is yeah,
So,
also unforgiving.
yeah,
Exactly.
yeah. So why does this band work? There's all kinds of groups that kind of come in and out, and what is it about this group that has been the glue that has made the sound work, that has made this kinship of musicians work?
I think we're all really good friends, which is, the basis for this. We didn't, there was no ambition to put this together to, be anything other than friends making music that they wanted to hear in the world. So that's the first thing. And then, I think that another thing that puts some glue in this project is that, we're all jazz musicians, but we all have a love of other types of music and particularly like pop music, or at least more popular forms of music. Nick plays in a non-jazz band. That's like one of his big gigs, and the other guys in the band also play in other non-jazz formats. Me being a sax player, I don't get to do it much, but I do love, different kinds of music. And so I think we wanted to make something that had somewhat of a pop sensibility in the sense of like, not just like a jazz rhythm. That the tunes would have particular rhythms that were unique to the tune, and that there was, it wasn't just like chords and melody on top of the chords, that things were a little more through written. And so there was a design to make something that was a little more specific than, just kind of like here's a chart with changes and a melody. That everything had a specific drum groove and a specific counterpoint and a bass line and so I think that that's something that gave the music a bit of a different vibe that we were interested in right from the beginning, and that we wanted to continue to pursue.
So I'm curious on this modern landscape, and with things being as weird as they are, let's say Miles Davis came back. and he listened to what's going on in modern jazz today, do you think what do you think he would think is going on? Do you think he'd be happy with it?
I'll let you answer this thing.
I mean, for yeah, I have no idea. But I feel like, he was always seemed like a stickler of not repeating what's already happened.
Yeah,
And there's definitely a ton of repeating what already happened going on. But I don't necessarily personally see that as something that is like completely invalid. I do think it can be pretty boring. I think there's a lot of really boring versions of it. But I think like this keeping the flame holder of this tradition, like in like a like literally like the guys that are going out and sounding like just like hard bop records. I think there's like a way to be inventive in that I still find very interesting, you know. Um, I also think that like he lived through a time, his his musical career spanned like the advent of almost all the music technology that we're still using now, you
hmm,
know. And I feel like we haven't had like this really big like shift in technology that really changes the music in quite a long time. Not in the way that like the DX7 changed it.
yeah,
Nobody had ever heard like synthesized sound like that before. Obviously, we have generative tools and constant new toys and digit way to make music digitally, and like that keeps forever advancing. But I still feel like there's not like this like massive shift in sound that like the entire culture is also experiencing. And part of that is because there's so much music happening at all times, so much music being put out every day. But yeah, I wonder what the new thing could even sound like, because
yeah.
a lot of it was just like byproduct of technology and the right people with that technology. But I don't see like, oh, AI is gonna can't wait to hear what Walter
No,
Smith
yeah.
the third does with AI.
Yeah, yeah,
I
It's not
think
a
there's also
thing.
a volume issue. Like there's so much volume of music coming out now that like it's gonna take some time to sort of have stuff get sifted through, you
yep,
know? Like I remember hearing this interview with Dave Liebman in the 70s, and he was talking about how small the scene was in New York. He was like, everybody knew everybody. It wasn't like it was. And this interview was quite a while ago, it was maybe 20 years ago.
yeah,
But it was, he was saying the scene was not like it is today. It was quite small. And so, like, even since 20 years ago, the volume of music being made. So, there is some great stuff out there, but it might not necessarily be, the amount of it might be kind of small.
yeah.
Or
I
it might
totally
get
get it.
drowned out by, so much other stuff that's happening, so that you have
Uh-huh.
the appearance of, maybe repeating things, but there are other things going on.
Yeah, for sure. So, what are you guys doing to promote the album? Live music. We're coming up on the warm months. What's going on for touring and things in your lives?
Well, I've been mostly playing with other projects because the drummer for this project is now in Austria.
Oh, okay,
So we did our record release last month, and we've got some stuff planned, but nothing particular for the coming months.
okay.
But we're we're publicizing the record, we're selling it, so yeah,
So, speaking of, is Bandcamp the best place if they want to benefit you the most to get a copy?
yes.
Okay,
For sure.
cool.
And we've got the vinyl on there, so pick up the vinyl. It looks great. Annie Del Hierro is Nick's wife, and she designed the jacket for the record, which looks beautiful.
So, aside from Triple Blind, each of you as separate jazz organisms, if anybody wants to dive into what you're doing, it's a very fluid world we live in. Where do they go to get involved?
Probably my website would be the best place to see what's going on with me.
Yeah, Kyle, you've been doing a lot with the Simona Quartet. I feel like you have a lot coming up, right?
Hmm. We're not going to St. Louis, but we're going to the Midwest next week. There's a great pianist, Simona Premazzi, and we released a record last year, and we've been playing quite a bit. The band features Noah Garabedian and Jay Sawyer. So I've been doing a lot of playing with Simona in that band.
Okay, cool. What about you, Nick?
Nothing. I'm working on a record with the metal band I'm in, and just kind of around. I'm playing a lot with this group Shardik that was came out on Sadiq label, John Zorn's label, with a really great group of musicians. We got some touring coming up this year.
Okay.
Um, that group and Triple Blind were there's both talks of going to Mexico City in the next year.
Okay.
So hopefully that happens. But yeah.
All right. I will put links in the show notes. Gentlemen, thank you. Thank you for taking a minute out on behalf of the whole band to have a minute out. It's great to reconvene. And it's great, Nick, to know that you're on one of my favorite albums of all time. So thank you.
I'll hit you up when I'm coming through. I always come through at least twice a year and play with Peter and them.
Oh, I'd love to. Yeah.
Yeah.
Peter's doing a regular gig at the Majestic now. And whenever I see him come out, and Electric Tinks to me is one of the more like progressive sounds in jazz that's come out in so long.
I mean, they're ridiculous. Peter's my favorite. He's amazing.
Yeah, it's amazing. Well, guys, it's great to catch up. Thank you.
Neon Jazz.